Welcome, welcome everyone to the Game Developer Guild Launch Night for 2022. Can you guys hear me now? Um, what we'll be doing today is we will be giving you a presentation of the Game Developer Guild and what we're kind of about. We're also going to be having our industry talk tonight. So that will be Danny Wei from Mihoyo, and he'll be kind of giving us an overview as to how you can get into the industry, what you can do to become kind of like get into the role you want to get into in game development. So that's some really awesome insight, and then we will be rounding off at the end of the evening or afternoon with a Q&A session with Danny. So send your questions you have for him in the chats, anything you think of while you're watching his presentation, and I will get those questions out to him during the Q&A. Awesome. Any questions so far? Hopefully not. There's a little bit of latency between me and the chat, so if there are any questions, I'll see them in 30 seconds or so, and I'll get to you then. Cool. So, not sure how many of you here are GDG veterans or new to the GDG. Let me know in the chat if you're new or whether you're returning. But what is GDG all about? We have kind of 5 pillars here at GDG of the kind of main things that we want to promote. So I'll just go through them one by one. I'll breeze through them a little bit. So education, we want to help you learn how to develop games. So if you have, if you want to learn how to make games, we have tutorials to support you to do that, and we provide our in-house game jams to give you an opportunity to have a go at making games. We also provide support. So throughout all of those things, the tutorials, the game jams, the industry nights, we're here to provide support for you to learn how to do what you want to do, and we're here to provide the resources you need. And it doesn't matter what background you're from, we're going to help you. Just let us know where you want to get to, and we'll help you get there. Creativity. So I don't know about you guys, but I feel like there's a lot of times where I'm chilling in class or chilling in my bed or something, and I'm like, man, that would be a really cool game to make. And I don't know how to start it, but it's like an idea I have. And so what we're about at the Game Developer Guild is listening to those ideas and those sparks that you have, and turning them into a reality. So we can make that a thing. We can get you a team, and we can start the development process. Personal development. So some people are here as hobbyists, but some people are here because they want to enter the game development industry as a career. And the University of Auckland in itself doesn't have a huge focus on kind of leading you into the game development industry. So what we're here to do is we're here to provide that in for you if you would like to move up to the game development industry post-graduation. So we do that by having these industry nights, connecting you with other like-minded people, and providing talks like the one you'll be having in a few minutes from Danny to teach you what you need and how to get into the industry. And collaboration. So, of course, we provide the opportunity to work with other people, which is kind of a skill in itself, really, when it comes to game development. I don't know about you guys, but my first few years of game development was just me in a room by myself, making my own little games, and learning how to make games with other people is so important. It's such a skill, honestly, because you can make so much more, but you also have to learn how to collaborate. So we provide that opportunity for collaboration and growing those skills. Awesome. So I'm not going to talk too much here, but what's in game dev, because Danny will go over a little bit of this in his presentation. We have 4 kind of areas of game development. So Obviously, there are a few more, such as game development, business, or marketing, but when it comes down just to the raw skills for creating a game, these are the four we kind of support and promote in Game Developer Guild. So art, that's creating the visual theme for a game, visual design, animations, drawings, the cinematics for a game, all of that stuff. Coding is the logic and the mechanics, and all the glue kind of holding the game together behind the scenes. So the sound is the music of behind the game, the sound effects, voice acting, all the kind of oral kind of environment that is going into the game. And last but not least, game design. So that's outside of actually kind of getting into the technical side of the game, that's creating what the game's going to be like, kind of being the fun creator of the game, ensuring that your game is fun and making it, kind of crafting it so it is, it delivers your purpose effectively. And we've also included writing the story of a game in here. But basically, if any of this stuff is interesting to you at all, GDG is for you, and we'd love to see you around. Cool, cool, cool. So, here is our more fleshed out timetable for this semester. So we do have quite a busy semester. Currently, you can see we are at week 2. So what we have coming up before the mid-sem is we have a few weeks of tutorials. So we have one for art coming up this Monday, in fact. One for coding. So this will just be an introduction to coding. So no, you don't need to have ever coded in your life before. We'll teach you everything from the ground up. And then the last tutorial we'll give for this semester is an introduction to Unity. So this one will assume a little bit of coding knowledge. And it'll be about taking that and being like, okay, now that I know how to code a little bit, how can I create a game with that? And then after that, we will start our first game jam round, which is my favorite part of hosting Game Developer Guild, to be honest. So what we do is at the end of every game development round, GDG Jam, we have a showcase night. And that's just like a fun night where everyone gets to play each other's games. COVID dependent. It might just be a stream like this one if we're still online by then. And then we'll have a second round of GDG Jam and then a games night right before exams. And I will say we do have an exciting announcement about GDG Jams this semester. So we have secured a stall for Armageddon around July or June this year, I think. And this semester, we would like to select the best game out of the games created in the GDG Jams this semester to showcase at Armageddon. So if you want some free promotion and free tickets to Armageddon, go all in for the GDG Jams. Awesome. And feel free to leave any questions you have in the chat. Cool. So, before I go any further, if you want to attend the tutorials and if you want to participate in GDG Jams, please, right now, go to unity.com/download and download Unity. We have this thing kind of every year where, I mean, and it's kind of bound to happen, but it's it is easier if people do this ahead of time, if they download Unity and get that sorted. Sniper Echo, oh, is it only Unity? Gotcha, disregard that question, no worries. So, actually, I'll do a little demo of this even. So what will happen is you will go to unity.com/download, and it will give you these kind of 3 little steps down here. So yes, you will want Unity Hub as well as your Unity version. So Unity Hub's just kind of like a little a nice little interface where you can see all your games laid out and you can click on them and stuff like that. So you'll want to download for whichever platform you have, and you'll go to the download archive and you can just download the most recent version of Unity. That's fine. So once you have Unity Hub, you can see here, there's just this download to Unity Hub button. And once you've pressed both of those, you're off, honestly. So right now, before we do anything, I highly, highly recommend going to unity.com/download and getting that ready to go before the first tutorial. Awesome. Cool. So I'd also like to take this time to introduce you guys to your 2022 execs. So you'll notice this year that I do look, if you're a GDG veteran, that I do look a bit different from your club night hosts last year. I have succeeded Vincent Clinton this year as tutorials officer. So Clinton will still be around. He's still a general executive. He'll still be here, but I will be taking club nights this year. So, as usual, we have Josh and Seo-in, our lovely president and vice president. We have Harry, our treasurer. We have Zach, who's our events manager. He takes care of all the huge events, such as like Kiwi Jam. I mentioned Kiwi Jam briefly in some of our club's expo stalls, so if you guys were there for that, you will have heard about that. But basically, it's a New Zealand's annual, kind of biggest annual game jam. So Zach's awesome. He manages that. We have Darren, our arts coordinator. He's behind a lot of the awesome emojis and promo branding images you see around GDG. And we have all our lovely general execs, Kim Song, Clinton, Jordan, Vincent, and Yue. So feel free to hit any of these people up on Discord. They are very friendly and are always happy to talk about video games. Cool. And last but not least, we do have we have a decent amount of people on the exec team, but we always say the more the merrier. So feel free to join us on the exec team. We're looking to recruit people in the following roles. As a treasurer, a sound coordinator, secretary, and or general executive. So this is open to anyone. Honestly, it's just such a, for me at least, I might be a bit biased because I have been in the executive role for a little bit now. Sorry, just seeing your question now. Yes, Visual Studio would be awesome to download if you don't already have that. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, so absolutely, download Visual Studio Code might be a better IDE to use, just because it's a little more lightweight and a little less confusing than just Visual Studio. But Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio should work. Thanks for the question. So what I can say is that being on the exec team has been, at the very least, I mean, it's helped a lot with my confidence and a lot with my just organizational abilities, and it's been a lot of fun and a massive CV booster. So if you are keen on joining an executive team this year, we would love to hear from you. So feel free to contact us, anyone with the council role in Discord, or email us at council@uoagdg.com if you're interested in becoming an exec. If you don't have a specific, if you're not super settled on like a specific executive role to be, we're always happy to have more general executives around. Cool. Awesome. So if there are no further questions, let me introduce to you guys Danny Wei. So Danny is alumni from University of Auckland, but he is currently working at Mihoyo, developing for Genshin Impact. However, he has worked quite a few large titles before. Thank you for the subscription. He has worked the Far Cry series, Genshin Impact, and Path of Exile. So what Danny will be presenting today is he will be giving you a presentation of how to get from perhaps a University of Auckland alumni or just get from graduating university all the way up to working where he is today. And he gives a really awesome overview of what you're going to need in your CV, what you're going to need to do in your interview, and he covers a whole bunch of areas in the game development industry as well. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
Hello everyone, my name is Danny and today I'll be giving an overview of the different roles in the video game industry and what you need to do to get into these roles. An overview of what we'll be talking about today. I'll start with an intro of myself and then we will start with the different roles in the industry. This is not an exhaustive list of roles, but the most common roles in the industry. And lastly, we'll end with some common CV and interview tips and questions. So a little about myself. I'm originally from Taiwan, but I came to New Zealand at a really young age. I lived in New Zealand for most of my life before moving to Montreal. I spent 4 years studying Bachelor of Engineering, Software Engineering, and graduated in 2012. Then continued with a Master's of Computer Science for 1 year and graduated in 2013. I landed my first job with a tech company in Auckland called Rush Digital Interactive. And throughout the time I spent at Rush, I got to work mostly on porting different Disney and well-known mobile projects to the Windows platform. I also had the chance to make our own driving game and port Path of Exile to Xbox One. After 4 years at Rush, I decided to try and apply overseas to a big AAA company such as Ubisoft, Eidos, Warner Brothers, BioWare. In 2017, I got an offer from Ubisoft Montreal and I moved overseas to work on the Far Cry brand. So since then, I've worked on Far Cry 5, Far Cry 6, before moving to Mihoyo last year as a senior gameplay programmer. So there are a lot of roles in the industry, and the most common ones are designers, animators, programmers, managers, and testers. There are other more specialized roles, but we won't have enough time to talk about them today. So first up, designers. I spoke with two of my past colleagues, Paul on the left, who started out as a level designer and is now a creative director of his own studio, and Guillaume on the right, who is a lead gameplay designer at Ubisoft Toronto. So in general, there are two types of designer in the industry. One is usability designers, so you're looking at UI designers, and the others is game designers, such as level designers and gameplay designers. Today we'll be talking about mostly game designers. So game designers are in charge of the fun factor in games. So they have a good knowledge of the current gaming trends and have the ability to come up with new ways to play or interact with the game world. They're also in charge with tweaking the mechanics to make sure the game is balanced and the player feels good while playing it. Game designers are also required to write design documents and to pitch their ideas to help communicate the design to the rest of the team, who's going to be the one that's implementing it. So there are some skills that are required with most, if not all of the job within the game industry, and designers are no exception. So these common skills are, having a passion for video games, obviously. If you need to work in the video game industry, you need to have passion. And the ability to work within a team environment, which means, being able to communicate with different types of people and discuss clearly and respectfully about games. So designers needs to work a lot with different departments to bring their vision to life. So it's really important that designers are comfortable with socializing with people and have strong written and oral communication skills. in order to write design documents and to communicate the design to the other departments. Designers should have a good understanding of the basic of game design and a rough idea of how things work in video games. So for example, how does the game detect that the bullet has hit an enemy? The high level idea would be through raycasts from the gun hitting the collider of an enemy actor or pawn. This is important because without knowledge of how things work, it slows down the design process, as the design process needs to be validated by other departments to ensure the design is feasible. So if the designer has these high-level concepts already, it's a lot easier to, validate the design by themselves. It is also important because it gives you an idea of how complex a new feature would be and who you need to talk to. And usually this will come from a formal education or from past work experiences. It is also important for design to have some sort of basic scripting and programming knowledge, be it visual scripting such as blueprints or actual coding experiences such as Python or C# with Unity. This is because given the present game engine technology, non-programmers now have access to visual scripting tools and are expected to be able to prototype or implement features on their own, as this can greatly speed up the iteration process without having programmers to implement these features, which is what happened in the past. Designers need to be able to take criticism well and not feel offended. Because literally everyone within the company can comment on their design, and this is something that's quite common where as a gameplay programmer myself, I worked really closely with designers, and we usually discuss about the design that's proposed. Designers also need to be flexible in both being able to work with various tools and change things on the fly. So what I mean by that is almost every studio has their own customized engine, and it's important that the designer can pick up these engines and learn quickly how to use them. Designers also need to be flexible in terms of their design. So often there could be different situations such as tech limitations or budget or time constraints, which means that certain features may be cut. And so for some of the designs, they need to accommodate these changes due to the missing feature. So for example, if you built a level that's based on a grappling design, a grappling feature, however that feature was cut, so now that whole level design needs to change since that was a core mechanic. Designers should also have a good analytical and problem-solving skills in order to anticipate potential problems of introducing certain designs into the game and how it can be avoided or mitigated. So for example, introducing a shield for the player in Far Cry 6. The shield cannot cover the player's entire body and head, or else it will block the camera view. So what happened was there was a risk that AI may still hit the player even though the shield is equipped. So to solve this problem, we decided to make sure the AI only aims at the shield when it's equipped on the player to give the illusion that the player is being protected. Lastly, designer is a creative role, and it requires them to come up with new ways of playing a game, which means they need to constantly be thinking outside the box and explore different possibilities to keep the players engaged. So if you want to be a designer, here are some tips and list of things that you should have. You want to highlight the important info, such as your education, past experience, what you did, and what you were responsible for. If you don't have a formal game design training, it is important to have some real life experiences such as game jams or own projects that you've completed. If you won or received special achievement in any of the competitions, such as game jams, feel free to mention it because it's a good demonstration of your knowledge and skills. You also want to customize your CV to the company that you're applying to. For example, look at what games they make. Do you have any examples of similar games that you made? If you do, then it's a good idea to probably put those in the portfolio or your CV. Next up is the portfolio. So game designers have portfolios, and the idea is to prove to the company that you're applying for that you have the skill and knowledge. So this is the key to getting an interview. So what should you put in the portfolio? So you can put design docs from projects you've worked on, examples of game. Doesn't need to be a completed product, just a demo will do. Even a failure of a demo, like something you launched but it didn't sell well. It shows that you've given it a go and that you tried, which is better than having nothing. So usually people do this by hosting a video screenshot on a website or on Google Drive, and also having a executable. So after getting a CV and portfolio and making the first cut, you will get a call for an interview. So a designer interview process involves 2 or 3 interviews depending on level. A good rule of thumb to remember is to demonstrate your knowledge and flexibility, such as having knowledge in multiple different genres or different engines or different platforms, for mobile, console, PC. The first interview is usually with HR, like with all the other departments, to see if you're a good fit for the team. Then you get a second interview, usually with a design lead, or with or without a senior designer accompanying the design lead. This interview is usually to get an idea of your design knowledge and how you work. Generally, you always get a few questions discussing the details of your CV and portfolio, such as what did you find difficult about a particular project? What issues did you face in this project and how did you solve it? Afterwards, there would be some questions along the lines of what is your favorite game of all time? Or what games are you currently playing? Here, the interviewer is most likely trying to find out about what game you're interested in, if that is in line with the game you're interviewing for, or gauge if you'll be a good fit for the team. So following from that, for gameplay designers, you're likely to get some role-playing questions, such as you can play as Dog in Far Cry 7. Tell me what features and changes you make. Or if you could add a new weapon to Titanfall 2, what could it be? Why? Or even what games do you think have good 3Cs? For level designers, you might get questions like, what do you think of a trailer for a particular game of your choice? What excites you? What worries you? One example that Paul gave me was that he was shown a early trailer for BioShock Infinite, the one with the railing. So they asked him what he worried about and what excited him the most. Or they could ask you, what do you think of a particular level of a particular game that's already been released? So for the last interview, you might get an interview with the directors and producers. In this interview, they would likely to discuss more about the processes and structure of the project, making sure you understand and are comfortable with how they work, such as the review process. It is also common for designers to get a take-home test, either before the first interview or the second interview, but that really depends on company. For game designers, you may get a test to write a design document to create a new feature for an existing games. For LDs, it could be to design a level using a paper prototype in a top-down view for a game that's already released by the company. So regardless of which one you get, by the end of these interviews, they will make a decision about whether to give you an offer or not. So that's about it for designers. Next, we'll move on to animators. So animators, I spoke to my friend who's a lead technical gameplay designer, Alexi, as you can see in the top right corner. So there are 2 main types of animator, gameplay animator and cinematic animator. We'll be talking more about the gameplay animator, as cinematic animator is similar to a 3D movie animator and aren't game specific. So gameplay animators are the people who help give game assets its personality, to make them come to life through movements. They help make the game feel smooth, fun, and satisfying to play. For example, does this combo feel good to execute? Does controlling the character feel smooth, look and feel smooth and responsive? So like any other discipline, animators also need to work well within a team as they work closely with other departments such as modelers, riggers, or programmers to achieve their tasks. The main skill that an animator needs is the ability to know how to animate, regardless of what software is being used, whether using Blender, 3ds Max, Motion Builder, Maya, or other animation software. For example, it is crucial to understand the 12 animation principles and knowing how to apply them at the right time, such as using anticipation and follow through to create natural movements. Animators should also be open to learning other ways of working as the industry evolves faster and faster. Newer and more efficient methods of doing things are discovered. This could greatly affect the quality of work and efficiency of an animator and improve the overall quality of the game. It is also good to have experiences with game engines and knowing how to export your animation from animation software and import it to a game engines, as it's also part of the animator's job. So having great attention to detail is one of the core skills of animators as well, as subtle differences between keyframes can have a great impact of how an animation feels and interpreted by the player. And it is also useful to have good problem-solving skills for different scenarios, such as finding out solving animation bugs or broken scenes or incompatible rigs. So if all this sounds good to you and you want to pursue the job of an animator, below are the list of things that you need to apply for the position. So first, for CVs, it is important to list your education. If not, then real life experience is important. So what I mean by real life experiences is experience where you had to produce animations with deadlines and requests from other people. This is different from just having a hobby, for example, or animating in your own free time, as it means you will have the experience of working under pressure towards a deadline and having to make animations that aren't necessarily what you enjoy making, and producing work that could possibly be not 100% completed, but it's the best quality given the time frames. Next is you definitely want a portfolio for pursuing a job of an animator. Portfolio is just as important as the CV, just like for designers. The format is usually a video showcasing rendered animations delivered through a Vimeo link, Google Drive, YouTube, or websites, however you like. The video should reflect your knowledge of what gameplay animations are, as well as the type of game that you're applying for. So don't go putting every animation you worked on in the portfolio. Do your research on the company, the type of games they're making. For example, don't have a portfolio full of third-person animations when you're applying for a position of animator for a first-person shooter game. The video should showcase real gameplay animations. For example, for FPS games, stuff like weapon reloading, weapon firing, switching weapons. Keep the video short and concise. Less than 3 minutes is good, maximum 3 minutes. I'll say probably even 1 or 2 minutes is optimal. And always put your strongest work at the beginning and at the end, so you have a strong start and a lasting impression to the interviewer. Lastly, always ask for feedback for your portfolio, as it helps you improve your video, even if you don't get the call back for an interview. So if you've done everything right, with a bit of luck, you'll be called in for an interview. The interview process for animators are relatively straightforward compared to designers. They're mostly 1 to 2 interviews and also a possibility of a take-home test. The first interview is the typical HR interview, talking about your CV, your past experience, and the HR partner will present your CV to the production team. And if the production team likes what they see, you'll get a second interview, which is basically to see if you're a good fit for the team. You'll usually get the typical questions of what kind of games are you into? What's your favorite game? Why is that? It's also possible to get a take-home test that is likely to be a task that requires to do some sort of animation. They will try and test your ability to iterate, measure how fast you animate and how well you receive criticism. So, for example, it's not uncommon for you to send your completed test, then get back some feedback, where you process the feedback and iterate on the animation a second time. If they want, they can throw in a curveball where they could give you a broken scene and ask you to fix it on top of making the animation. So after all this, a decision will be made on whether you'll receive an offer or not. Next, we'll move on to programmers. So I'm a gameplay programmer myself, so these are based on my own experiences. So there are many types of different programmers in the game industry. There's gameplay programmers, AI programmers, engine programmers, rendering programmers, UI programmers. In general, programmers provide support to other departments. This can be to develop in-house tools to speed up iteration times for other departments, such as creating animation tools, texturing tools, or to build new gameplay features to help bring the designer's vision to life. We provide low-level support to teams as they work most closely with game engines by modifying code and by making sure the performance of the game is at an acceptable level, usually making sure the memory budget is within the system limits and the frame rate is at least 30 frames per second. Because of the large amount of different specializations, they each require different specific knowledge. So in general, a programmer needs to know either C++ or C#, since all game engines are written in C++ or C#. For C#, that's for Unity. Programmers usually have some sort of formal training, and from that, a good understanding of the following concepts: object-oriented programming, entity component system design, basics of performance, for example, how to measure performance and how to improve code for performance. As part of the job of programmers is to logically break down designs from designers into code implementations. They must be able to translate design requirements to code. Programmers should have at least some experience with at least one engine, which is a given if you made a game either for a finals project or by yourself with a few friends. Since there's so many different engines available for free right now, there really isn't any excuse. Programmers are the last line of defense for fixing any bugs found in the game, as they have access to the lowest level of the game engine. So having strong debugging skills are a must. Programmers also work with other departments to help implement changes to gameplay designs, so iteration skills are also good to have. Lastly, programmers need to have experience in Scrum and Agile programming, as it's the standard for the games industry. So if that sounds good to you and you want to be a programmer, here's what you would need for your CV and what you will get in an interview. So for a programmer CV, you'll want to list your formal education. If you don't have one, make sure you have the experiences to cover that. But it's definitely better to have a formal education, as this is a highly technical role. You would want to highlight any experiences in using any engines, Unreal, Unity, for example. Next would be to list any coding languages you know, along with the proficiency. So for example, C++, 8 years, C#, 4 years, Python, 3 years, so on and so forth. Lastly, any other technical skills related to the position. For example, 3D programmers could be knowledge of HL/SL shaders, the rendering pipeline. For AI programmers, knowledge of machine learning or pathfinding algorithms, as well as any past project experiences. So once your CV has been seen by the company and they decide you might be a good fit for the position, you'll be invited in for a programmer's interview. Programmer's interview is a different beast compared to the other department interview process, as it contains a technical interview. Usually there is 2 to 3 rounds of interview, where you'll get around 2 technical interviews. Like other interview process, the first one's usually with a HR talking about the CV and to gauge if you're a good fit for a particular team. Second and third interview are usually includes technical test, which could be either a online test or a phone technical test. So first technical tests are usually questions about your previous projects, such as how you implement certain features, what problems you faced, and how to solve them, as well as basic programming knowledge, such as what is a stack, what is the heap, explain what is memory fragmentation, or my favorite, what is 2 to the power of 10, or or explain what is inheritance. There's also possibility of giving hypothetical questions, such as if you have a large amount of objects to update each frame, what sort of containers would you use and why? So these questions are there to kind of gauge how much knowledge you have to what depth. And if they determine that you've got the right knowledge and the right skills, you'll move on to the next technical test, which will be more advanced, where you'll get coding questions, which you have to write code without using an IDE, such as on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper, or in Notepad if you're doing online interviews. So example question could be, write some code to detect if an enemy is in front of you, or something like write code to allocate a line memory. And you would need to do this live on a medium that's not an IDE. So other than that, some companies also give timed online tests or take-home tests. For take-home tests, it usually involves a few different exercises. For example, I got one before that was to code a A-star path finding algorithm, given some boilerplate code, as well as find some error in some code, and extending the functionality of some existing code. So with these technical tests, they're looking at the following things. First, your coding standard and style, if you're giving suitable variable and function names, following best practices, your critical thinking skills, your error checking, such as considering all different edge cases, and optimization. So how does your code performs in terms of big O notations? And if you know that you could improve, if you know how to analyze this and improve the code somehow. So no matter what happens, remember the interviewer's job is to try to push you to your limits and gauge how much you understand. And so often you'll feel like they are hard and you couldn't answer all the questions. And this is completely normal. And don't let it affect your confidence. Remember to stay open and friendly during the interview. And after the last technical test, they'll look at the results and decide if you'll get an offer or not. Next, we'll move on to managers. So there are many different types of manager in the video game industry, and the names vary from company to company. I spoke with Masao, who had experience in the past as a project manager and is now a producer of his own studio. So managers are the one who make sure the games are delivered on time, within budget to an acceptable quality. They're the master of pulling everyone together and pushing everyone in the same direction by helping people work together. Depending on the studio, they can wear multiple hats, from tracking tasks and project completion times to hiring new employees to helping define pipelines. They're not directly involved in the development of the game, but they're an integral part of game development. Managers need to be able to communicate well, both orally and in writing, as their job involves talking with many people throughout the day and creating reports from data such as burn down charts. Compared to other disciplines, it is harder to gain experience by yourself since you need a team in order to learn management. So considering this, it is definitely helpful to get some training from formal education such as a HR or product management degree. Also, it's helpful getting certification in tools. So for example, Jira and Scrum is great because these are used very often in many companies. However, previous experience from non-industry game industry company can also replace these certificates, as there are many non-game companies that have started to use Jira and Scrum. And lastly, they need to be able to break down big tasks into small tasks and enter them into ticket system for tracking. So if this sounds good to you, then read on. So the goal of the CV is to prove that you have the knowledge and experience to do the job. So anything you can put on the CV to determine that is a big plus. So the most obvious thing to do first is to list any of your qualifications and certifications, followed by your past experience, then any extracurricular activities that demonstrate your management skills. So for example, if you have organized an event for a student organization before, or created an esport club at a university and organized an event, all those are things that you could put in your CV to demonstrate your management skills. The idea is to demonstrate that you have the ability to get things done and to get other people to help you get things done. So the interview process for a manager is usually 1 to 2 interviews. You'll get some question about your CV, such as your qualifications and past experiences, such as what difficulties did you face and how did you overcome them. Then you'll most likely get presented with a hypothetical situation and be asked how you would handle that particular situation. For example, there is someone who's very important to the team and has specific knowledge, high output, but it's toxic. What do you do? Questions like these, there are a lot of different ways to handle. Do you fire this person? Do you get the team to put up with it? There's no right answer, since the right answer really depends on the company culture and the person interviewing you. So if that's the case, how should you handle it? Because there's no right answer. And from Masal's experience, he believes you should always be truthful to your own values and what you're comfortable with doing, because that is what the company would be expected for you to do should this situation arise. Other questions you could be asked are, for example, how do you go about creating a pipeline for a deliverable that 6 people have to touch before they deliver that asset? Or for a tracking system, make sure everyone's getting the right visibility and showing the various completion levels. Lastly, depending on the different studios and countries, processes will vary. One very interesting thing is in Japan, they make you take general knowledge tests to make sure you know the basics. So, general math tests, geography tests, English tests. So that's done for everyone. So it really depends on your country and the company you're interviewing for, which you'll just know from experience after handling a lot of different interviews. So after these, the company will make a decision based on what they think your way of handling things is in line with how the company will handle things or not. So last but not least are testers. So here I spoke with my friend Chris about this role. So testers are the first line of defense against bugs and identifying problems within the game. They test game systems through different interaction and repetition. It has the easiest entry-level positions to get in and the most flexible career progression. It is possible to start from, for example, a tester entry-level position and switch roles to become a game designer, animator, project manager, or even a programmer internally. The difference between a tester role versus other role is that it doesn't require any formal training and previous experience, although it is a plus if you do have previous experiences. Testers, like all of the people who work in the video game industry, has to have a good amount of curiosity towards making video games, because you're going to be testing them 8 hours per day, 5 days a week. One of the main jobs of a tester is to identify bugs and log them. So they're required to have good written and communication skills. This is to make sure the bugs are logged with as much detail as possible and can be easily reproduced by the person fixing the bug. They're also required to write up test plans, which is pretty much a plan of how you are going to test the various different features of the game. Which brings me to my next point, which is experience in using bug logging tools such as Jira. It's important for a tester to know these tools and to have some experience with them, such as knowing how to search for a bug, submit a bug, and how to search for different information. Lastly, testers need to be patient in order to handle the repetitive nature of the job. They don't play through the game the whole day, whatever level or feature they like. They usually spend time checking for a bug within a specific system, feature by interacting with that feature or system repeatedly with different interactions. For example, testing if a player can get into a vehicle in Far Cry 6, you would have to test that the player can get into the vehicle from every single door and can switch seat from every single other seat. And then repeat this process for every type of vehicle there is, which, for example, there are boats, planes, motorcycles, jet skis, etc. It is time consuming and repetitive, so you need to be prepared for that. So if you think being a tester is the right job for you, then here's what you need for your CV and for your interview. For your CV, you want to make sure to list any experience related to testing, such as testing for a friend's game or a final year's project. Apart from that, making sure you tick the boxes for all the skills required for a tester from the slide before. For a tester interview, you're likely to have 1 or 2 interviews. And these usually involve with the usual HR interview about your experiences, followed by another interview testing your ability on bug finding and your personality fit for the team. For the bug finding test, you could get a screenshot or video, and you need to write down all the bugs that you can find. For example, a image from Skyrim, there's 3 people sitting inside a house with a male NPC sitting outside. Here the bug is obvious, that the NPC outside is out of place. An answer that you could say is there's an NPC sitting outside. But a better answer would be in more detail and more descriptive. Something like, there's an NPC that should be sitting in the dinner table inside, but he's sitting outside without a chair, so he's floating mid-air. The key is to be as thorough as you can and as descriptive as you can. As if you're talking to a baby. These tests are designed to test if you're able to identify bugs from non-bugs, and how well you can write a bug report. And afterwards, a decision is made to give you an offer or not. So here are some other general tips, that can apply to any of the disciplines. So for example, general writing CV tips: keep it short and concise, no more than 2 pages. If you're just getting out of university, 1 page is probably enough. Make sure all the experiences and everything you put in your CV is related to what the role needs. So don't put anything like, I like to play basketball, or I play the piano, or I like watching anime, if it doesn't relate to what the role needs. Having references also really helps. So if you know of anyone in that particular company that you want to get in, having them pass the CV on is, a big plus, and, really gives you that edge in getting hired. If you don't have that, having a cover letter goes a long way, and it shows your passion, your intention, your personality. So always write a cover letter if you can. And lastly, customize your CVs and cover letters or portfolio for every company and position. You want to make sure that you are using the same terminology that is used in the advertising. and try and write your CV and your cover letters and your portfolio towards what they're looking for. And some general interview tips. Always demonstrate your passion for video games. When we see people with passion, we want to work with them, and that gives you a better chance of being hired. Always answer positively, but stay truthful. So if you don't know the answer to something, say I don't know, but follow up with, I'm keen to find out in my own time after the interview and learn about that particular thing. And remember, interview is for both ways. You might be interviewed by the company, but at the same time, you're interviewing the company to see if it's a good fit with your personality and how you would like to work. If you don't know the answer, it's not the end of the world, like I said before. And do your research on the company, so you can find out as much as you can about how they work and what games they make. And lastly, remember, practice makes perfect. So you might not ace your first interview, but once you take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 15 interviews, you'll like to see a pattern with the questions and the things you get asked, and you'll get better at it. So lastly, any questions and some extra resources for anyone interested. So some channels on YouTube and animation books. And if you would like some help in the job application process and preparation, you can check out Starreach Coaching. It's a business that I've started because I remember when I first started looking for a job fresh out of university, it was tough. I didn't know where to find information, how to structure my CV, how to prepare for interviews. And that is the exact reason that I wanted to start a business like this, is to help you guys to avoid the same trial and error process that I went through, and to find out how to properly lay out your CV, writing, and how to prepare for an interview. So yeah, if you're interested, feel free to contact me through the website. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that chat, Danny. What an awesome way to start the year, honestly. Man, it's so good to have you here.
No, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. So this is Josh, our club president. I'm Izzy, as I've already introduced myself. And everyone watching, this is Danny, who just hosted the lovely talk you just watched. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to start off by asking. So I actually got a question partway through the talk from Forsona asking what exactly does senior gameplay programmer actually entail, kind of like in a day to day. Kind of what does it look like? What does the day to day look like for you in terms of what you work on?
That's a really good question, actually. I actually thought a lot about this when I first started, entering into the workforce. There's a lot of different definitions, and from it varies from who you talk to and which company you work at. So I'll give an example of what I think it is, and also what I learned, what it means for example, Ubisoft Montreal, what it means for them. So personally, I think
recording in progress.
It's simply the senior means you're autonomous. You can work where project managers can give you a task and you're able to complete it from start to finish without needing help from anyone else. And from help from anyone else, I mean by for example, you're not kind of stuck on, I'm not sure how to, write this function or do such things, technical programming skills. Like you'll still need help from artists and, designers and all of that. But I mean, from a technical side, you don't need any guidance. You're able to considered all the aspects of the programming side.
Right.
And from Ubisoft Montreal's side, they talk more about influence. So a senior programmer is the person that's going to have more influence towards either the project he's on or the studio as a whole. So influence as in, the coding styles, the technology, how stuff is being built, and, the structure of the code. So these kind of things.
Yeah. How does it feel for you? I guess what I'm curious about is how does it feel for you holding a senior title as opposed to just kind of like a regular title? I guess for me, because from my work experience, I guess perhaps it's just an experience or confidence thing, but for me it was nice to not have the responsibility of it's kind of like I almost felt like if I was in a senior role, it's like if I mess something up, it's really gonna mess everything up, Whereas like when I was working as a regular engineer, it was just kind of like, oh, you can work on this part, and do with it what you will. But ultimately, there's someone else guiding the ship for you, which always felt a bit comforting to me. So I guess what I'm asking is, how do you enjoy the difference between being a senior engineer now, and what's the main difference you would say?
Yeah, so first part of the question is I definitely enjoy being a senior because I want, like, my own career goal when I first started was that to be able to help contribute to a game significantly, and not just be the person just kind of getting told you're making this, you make this feature. I want to be the person that kind of decides, okay, we're gonna add this feature, add this really cool new weapon to this game, or be able to contribute in that way.
Yeah.
And that really is a decision that's made at a higher level. And in terms of difference between a senior and a junior programmer, like you said, I don't think, at least at Ubisoft anyway, it's not that much of you can't make mistake. You've got to know everything. It's more a collaborative effort where a senior programmer is acts more like a mentor and guides the junior. So in my time at Ubisoft, I mentor a bunch of people, and my mentality is always teach the juniors how to analyze problems,
right?
Teach them how to solve these problems rather than just telling them the answers. So consider, have you considered the performance of your code? Have you considered the memory budget of your code? How can you improve what you're writing to be better? Teach them how to just self-improvement. And I think that's really the role of a senior programmer, rather than I have to guide the ship. I have to be able to write perfect code, no errors on the first go. I think that's a misconception.
Right. There was definitely a misconception for me up until now. I appreciate the clear up there.
That's actually interesting, because from my experience in the web and software sphere, there's actually been no instances where the senior dev actually gives examples on what coding architecture we should use as a company to the junior devs, but sometimes it actually is the case that the senior dev just guides the developer to solve their own problems rather than having it be done by a manual or some answer from Stack Overflow or something like that.
Yeah, I think I can definitely give an example of a real life example of guidance that I did. And there's both sides. I understand your side where sometimes if a solution has a really clear cut like if a problem has a clear cut solution where you've done this before and this problem like the back of your palm, go ahead and suggest that solution. But I tend to like to see what the junior comes up with, and I think the best way for people to learn is to learn from mistakes.
Right.
And you never know. Sometimes you think that might not be such a good idea, but it turns out it's actually a better idea than what you thought of. And an example of that was the animation system that we were working on for Far Cry 5, Far Cry 6, requires, when we're doing takedowns, it requires the player to be able to use different weapons for different takedowns.
Right.
And initially I thought, simply we just program the system to be, the system set up to be, for this particular takedown, you're just equipping this weapon. For a pistol takedown, you're equipping the pistol. For so on, a normal takedown, you're using a machete. But a junior actually, came up to me and said, why don't we make this flexible? Give the control to animators, allow them to decide what weapons to equip during these takedowns. At first I was kind of like, I don't know if they will need this feature. And most of the time when you give designers too much control, they might make mistakes and end up with a lot of bugs. But it turns out actually it worked really well, because for the DLC for Far Cry 6 is, you play as different villains, as a lot of people might know. And that system actually helped with that, because we're able to swap out the weapons.
Right.
Our animators can just swap them out easily without programmers having to do anything. So that really helped with with that.
Yeah. I guess that kind of gave them a bit of that flexibility to do artistically what they wanted to do with it as well.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
And I obviously didn't come up with a solution, a junior programmer did.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that is actually fascinating. Yeah. Which actually leads to another question though. So if you give too much autonomy or power to the designer, and they do make mistakes, how would Ubisoft or Mihoyo handle it? Because it will mess up the pipeline to some degree.
It's very different how companies handle this, and giving power to designers. So I'll talk about what Ubisoft does. Is Ubisoft tend to empower designers a lot. So we like to tend to give as much control and flexibility to the designers. And if it turns out to be issues or bugs, that will just get reported as bugs, and either the designer will try and see if they can figure out the problem. If not, then the bug obviously flows down to the programmers, where we're going to look at the code and see what the issue is, and we'll relay that information of you set this data wrong, or this value shouldn't be this, back to the designers, and obviously we'll make adjustments to the code to make sure the error values are not able to be present in the program. So in the UI, for example, if the designer is not able to have a value larger than 1, for example, then we'll actually cap that at 1, so they won't be able to make that mistake again. On the Mihoyo side, they're a lot more conservative. They tend to only give what designer asks for, and that's it, no more. So there's benefits to both sides. One is designers are flexible; they can really just go crazy and just use the tool to create whatever they want, as you can probably see with the Far Cry 6 weapons. But the downside to that is it's prone to bugs. Whereas the other side, if you limit the amount of stuff they can control, it really cuts down on the bugs and creates a more stable system. But the downside to that is kind of you're sacrificing the creativity and the flexibility a little bit.
Would you say, because as a result of that, would you say the pipeline at Mihoyo was as a result more efficient than the one at Ubisoft?
I don't believe that a pipeline is more efficient than another, simply because in game industry we're just iterating constantly.
Of course. Right.
So the pipeline is actually very short, and we're just constantly iterating. We do sprints every 2 weeks. So the efficiency really depends how you're measuring it. Actually, is it based on how much code you've written, or is it how much feature you complete, or is it based on how much of a brand new feature that you developed. It really varies depending on what stats you're looking at.
Right, I see. I guess for me, I was thinking it was like if there's less chance of some kind of an error or some kind of a bug, you can get things out to production quicker, and tests will run through faster and pass more often. I was wondering in that way, did you run into more bugs working on, say, the Far Cry series than with something like Genshin Impact?
It's kind of hard to remember how much bug there is.
Yeah, of course.
We were up to a few. I remember it was something like 500. Like the ID of the bugs were up to like 5,000 or something crazy like that. So, and with Mihoyo, I've only been here for half a year, so I haven't gotten used to seeing how big the impact is. But from what I can see, it does help limit the bugs. But in terms of creativity, yes, you limit the bugs, but if the designer comes back and asks you, oh, I really want this new feature, you have to go back and redesign or add new features. Whereas, what we did with Far Cry, most likely the designers are able to do that without us having to intervene.
Right.
And yeah, and the whole pipeline, takes a while for, the designer to add the code, for the new build to come out, for the designer to grab that build, and then be able to do whatever they're doing. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. It's really interesting.
Would you say that the bug fixes you make for Ubisoft is a bit more sporadic, much less streamlined compared to Mihoyo, which is every 2 weeks, or is depending? I guess it's depending on like when the bug is reported and how severe is it to the pipeline.
So the pipeline that we use really depends on what, like when we fix bug, really depends on what stage you're in the game development. So if you're in pre-production, you're most likely not going to be fixing all the bugs that come through. You're going to be fixing the critical ones that really is blocking the artists, the other disciplines, to prevent them from working or preventing reviews from being going on. So if there are other small bugs, like for example, the UI is wrong, displaying the wrong health bar, but it's not crashing, and the review isn't looking at that at the moment, then most likely you won't be fixing stuff like that. But as we move on towards, alpha, beta, that's when we're really, ramping up the bug fixing and, not adding new features. So, it's a difference between pre-production and beta.
Right.
And trying to ship the game. Yeah.
I guess kind of adding on to that, one thing I've always been curious about is how real is that kind of like pre-deadline crunch in the game development industry?
Everyone's heard about that,
yeah.
right? Yeah, the stories, the news articles. Well, again, depends on the company. I personally haven't done a whole bunch of crunch working on the Far Cry series. And also it really depends on your team, right? If you're, I was lucky, I had a really good manager who was very anti-crunch. Believe that, if something can't be done in this timeline, then, we need to cut something to make it fit and make decisions based on that. So it really depends on the team, depends on the company culture. I definitely heard, there's some crazy crunches going on at some of the other companies, but
right.
I personally didn't have to do, the crazy, like before shipping 3 months.
Yeah.
Everyone's working 80 hours a week or something stupid like that.
The Amazon like logging your bathroom breaks kind of deal.
No, definitely we didn't have that. No.
Awesome.
That was crazy. Tying the ball and chain, tying yourself to the desk. No, they don't do that.
Okay, so that's a positive review for working at Mihoyo and Ubisoft, from what it sounds like. It's good to hear. I think definitely. I'm still in university, and I guess a lot of the people I talk to in university are kind of like, I'm interested in game development, but I'm going to keep it as a hobby because I'm scared of going into an industry that kind of, that would work you like that, I guess. But it's reassuring to hear that is not all companies.
No, and I think
Really isn't. Yeah.
I think a lot of time is because people are so passionate, they're willing to put extra time in to complete what they want. I think personally, I do that sometimes if
Mm,
I'm really passionate about my feature because
right.
when you get so into it, you have ownership of the system. You kind of
Yeah.
you're
Mhm.
proud. You want to make it 100%.
Mm,
I'm sure artists would understand.
yeah.
Trying to make that art 100% perfection.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but from what I know, the company, none of the company actually forces you to do it.
Right.
There's no company that says
Mhm.
you have to do overtime or we'll fire you. No, I think that's
Yeah.
even illegal.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, a lot of time is, people are just so passionate,
Mm,
they want to do this in their own time to do the best work they can,
yeah. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of people watching can relate. I mean, I guess that's why they're watching. They're interested in the Game
Mhm.
Developer Guild because I guess that's what we're all about here. It's kind of about enjoying game development so much that it's something you want to keep working on outside of university in your own time. You want to
Yeah.
create something. Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially.
One thing I do like about the game development industry is I win almost everyone I've met who's in it is just so passionate about what they're doing.
yeah.
Everyone's so excited to be working on a video game. Which I think is really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, the dream job of
Yeah,
any video game player would love.
exactly.
You're playing video games and you're making, games. You get to, create this amazing experience for the players
For
to
sure.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Speaking of amazing experiences, Persona actually asked, what was your favorite project when you were working as a senior gameplay programmer? This could be either Ubisoft or anything yeah, or Mihoyo.
I mean, I only been in Mihoyo for 6 months, so I'm
Mm,
still kind of, getting used to the project. But I really enjoy definitely working on Far Cry 6,
mm,
because that's the project that I got to a senior level and I got to join a lot of different decision makings and understand, the logic behind, why we're doing such things within the industry. And also be able to contribute a lot on the the coding side to the weapon system. So on Far Cry 6, I was the main gameplay programmer for weapons. So I was able to work on the different weapons and the different mechanics that each weapon have. And I think that was just really cool, be able to make the weapon so unique and so different, and work with designers and animators who
Mm,
I built a really strong experience,
right.
friendship with.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
see.
Do you?
See,
Oh, you go ahead, Josh.
uh, yeah, I was just gonna say, it is actually true that in the AAA scene, there's actually just a dedicated team to that specific feature. Because I
Exactly.
remember the story of God of War 2018, and they literally just have one guy or one team dedicated to the Leviathan axe. I'm really astounded by that. Just an entire team of 10, 20 people dedicated for just the one
A
axe that
single
Kratos uses.
axe.
I've got a better story
Oh
than that.
no.
Okay.
There's one programmer that's dedicated to the Batman Arkham Asylum's cape. There's one dude that works on it for 2 years, and
That's
you can tell
incredible.
the detail of that cape. But the amount of detail that gets involved in the AAA industry is insane.
Mm.
I mean, even in the industry, they're kind of upping another level. They're calling it quadruple A now.
Oh my
That's the
god.
next cool
Right.
thing. There's no triple A. So, and as you can see, with the games, it gets more detailed
Mm.
as
Mm.
technology involves. We're able to do more things, and yeah, we just because we want everything to be so detailed, there's got to be teams that specifically deal with specific features,
Mm.
and that's quite common in AAA or AAA industry.
Yeah. I suppose that lines up. I mean, Danny and I were chatting before the stream, but it kind of lines up with. Sounds reminds me of the movie industry as well. Actually, I just remember watching documentaries on teams of like tens and tens of people just like working on hair in like Disney movies. Um, so I think we're getting to a really interesting stage of game development where you can achieve like that insane amount of quality. Um, in the graphics, which I think is it's something very new because I feel like the graphics have come a long way very quickly. Um, like I'll have this experience every once in a while where I'll go back to play a game I really enjoyed like 10 years ago and be like, oh my god, these graphics are disgusting, you know. um,
Yeah, I had that when I gone back and played Final Fantasy VII,
yeah.
the PlayStation
Oh,
1
wow.
version. I was like, what is this
Ooh,
blocky hands?
right.
The mechanics are amazing, but the graphics, ooh.
Right. Just like a single polygon for the body.
Yeah, I mean the hair is like a
Yeah.
triangle, a few triangles glued together. You know, it's yeah.
It's
Compared to
good
the new
stuff.
Final Fantasy VII,
Right?
it's different.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it feels very specific like nostalgia like purposes for me, I think.
Mm.
And I think it's interesting definitely when I think games use a specific design or specific graphics to kind of like recall that nostalgia in people. I mean, I feel like a lot of indie games do that with kind of like pixel RPG style games making a resurgence recently
Yeah.
as well. It's interesting. We almost have these two different streams of games, either kind of like diverging into these like insane graphics or kind of really delving into creating a really specific vibe with lower quality graphics.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Did you, speaking of which, did you have, or are you currently working on any of your own? I mean, I suppose you'd be busy alongside, working in game dev as a full time job, but are you working on any of your own projects, like alongside your current work?
Yeah, definitely. So you know, the project that I'm working on right now, just you know, as more of a hobby,
Mm,
is a game in Unreal Engine.
right.
So the idea is to have a first-person shooter action game.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, you know, create something kind of like a mashup on genres, you know, where you have action RPGs that was, you know, made famous kind of by Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
I want to kind of try and mash together the first person, you know, genre with like Devil May Cry or
Yeah.
Bayonetta, something like that.
Ooh.
You know, to kind of put you in that kind of intense moment action in first person rather than third person.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's a challenge right
That's
now. There's a lot
awesome.
of there's a lot of problems to solve. You know, just working on it in my own time and see
Yeah, I
if it turns
bet.
into something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's an interesting challenge because it's basically. Have you ever played Mirror's Edge?
Yes, that's one of the things
Yeah.
that I kind of got inspired by is
Mhm.
I wanted core idea incorporated into that. Yeah, and Mirror's Edge is one of the games that, you know, I've been referencing and reviewing.
I just think it's an interesting concept, implementing that in first person because I feel like, I don't know, something about having the whole parkour theme in third person allows you to get a better view of your environment and kind of lets you plan your moves and stuff. So it'd be really interesting to see something like that in first person.
Yeah, so like a game that I've been kind of deeply focused on, and I think it's very similar, is Dying Light.
Dying Light.
So they've
Right.
got that parkour element, but what they're missing that's going to be different is they've got more of a melee style gameplay
Yeah.
rather than like a gun kind of
Yeah.
gameplay, which is what I want to kind of incorporate more, like the gun gameplay with, you know, parkour and stuff. Yeah.
I think it'll be an interesting challenge because I guess the reason, well, not the reason, but I guess the reason what kind of why they might have gone for first person there is because it is that very much that kind of like close encounter experience. So it gives you, I guess that's why it encourages melee combat, having a first person kind of parkour game. So it'd be really interesting to see how you incorporate that for more ranged combat. Yeah. Any
Yeah,
no
definitely,
planned release
definitely.
for it yet.
Oh no, definitely
No,
not. It's
that's
still
fun.
very pre-production stage,
Yes.
you know, without any environments.
Yes.
I'm still using the basic models from Unreal Engines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone's gonna
Okay.
have a project on the side, I feel like.
Yeah,
Okay.
everyone.
Yeah. But speaking of projects on the side, though, actually, I'm curious when it comes to if someone applies as a gameplay programmer, would you recommend having a demo reel of their games made as part of their portfolio? Because,
For programmers, you mean?
yeah, for programmers, because yeah, animators and designers kind of make sense, but it kind of also makes sense that if they have a portfolio of projects that they want to showcase, would it also help to show those projects as kind of like a demo reel or a video reel?
That's a good question, actually. Thinking back when I first applied for Ubisoft, I did have links to some of the past games or stuff that I made, but I don't think it matters as much for a programmer. And the answer to that, why that is because for programmers, we're looking at more of the coding skills, the basic principles. If you know your design patterns, if you know optimization and performance, all of these different things. And having a portfolio doesn't really show the interviewer that kind of knowledge. I think the only thing that you'll be able to show them is, like, for example, if you're trying to interview for Assassin's Creed and you made a third person game, especially working on the three C's of the character, then that could indicate to them, okay, so he's got experience in this, but they're still going to test you on these knowledge anyway in the technical test. So it's not going to impact much to have that. Like, at most will demonstrate that, yeah, you've got passion for the industry. You like to learn stuff by yourself, which is a big plus. But I don't think it's going to be that make or break decision to hire you or not.
Right.
Okay.
I'm just curious, just for some of our viewers. So you mentioned this in your video as well, but what are those three C's that you bring up?
Right. Okay. So sorry. So that's just a shortened word that we use. So three C's is about control, camera, and character. So that's the three C's. So you're looking at, if you're a three C's programmer, you're going to be specializing in these three things. So mostly everything to do with the player, pretty much.
Right.
So how the player controls. How do you control your avatar or your in-game character? How does the camera move with that? And then the character would be what kind of features the character can do. Can he slide? Can he jump? Can we wall run? These are kind of things.
Right. Yeah. So are those just kind of considered the three, would you say, like, core mechanics behind a game, or?
No, it's just the kind of the part that gameplay programmers would specialize in mostly.
Right,
so
I see.
The
Okay.
C's is what gameplay programmers are usually focuses on. We usually focus on exactly what the player would experience.
Yeah.
That's what a gameplay programmer would usually.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh. Okay. So if you are a gameplay programmer, how often do you touch base with the design team when it comes to the gameplay design, or the design of the gameplay mechanics? Yeah, every day.
Every day. Yeah, and I think that goes with a lot of disciplines. Game development is a very collaborative effort. I mean, I don't talk to every single discipline every single day, but I work really closely with designers, especially when I'm on the weapon team. I work really closely with the weapon designers. I also work really closely with the animators because they need to incorporate whatever the game design wants, the new feature, whatever animation they need. It needs to go through the animation team. And sometimes, depending on if we need what kind of sound effects or visual effects, we'll talk to the visual effects and the sound effect artists as well. So yeah, there's a lot of interaction between the different, disciplines, and, you talk on them and you talk with them on a daily basis to, make sure you understand what's going on, or, you talk about any issues that crops up, or any uncertainties that, come up with the design, and, we discuss them on a daily basis.
That's awesome. I mean, I guess the longer you leave it without talking to them, the more assumptions you have to make and the more dangerous it gets.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, is that as a programmer, it's always best not to make any assumptions, to make confirmations. So that's one thing I learned, is that if you're not sure about something, ask the designer or ask the animator, confirm with them what their intended purpose is, get some context, so then you can, make sure the code you're writing is gonna suit their need exactly.
Right.
And that's gonna save time in the long run as well. Rather than you submitting code, making assumptions, them getting a new build and realizing that's not what they wanted, they come back to you, and this whole process kind of repeats itself
Over and over again. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
So how do you? So that's a really good point. So how do you guys? I guess especially in the context of COVID and working remotely, because I guess if you're in person, you can just walk over to that team and ask with them. But how do you guys ensure that kind of transparency during remote work?
That's a really good question. I think a lot of companies, it's still figuring that out, even though we're 2 years and more into the pandemic. Remote work really was kind of sprung upon the studios here in Montreal. So, it was easy to get the infrastructure going. So, we just needed to make sure either everyone has internet to be able to remote desktop, or they were able to bring their computers home.
Right.
But in terms of collaboration effort, it really comes down to just, staying on top of what you need, and just, messaging people, video chat. We try to use video chat as much as possible to reproduce that kind of face-to-face meeting and all of that. But in terms of culture, I think, which is I believe one of the most important things to have in a team, and how to make good games. That's still, we're trying to still figure out how to get that, to pandemic levels, when you're working remotely.
Of course.
It's quite hard to, grab a coffee with your colleague. I mean, we try to do, Friday beer time at home, where we, chat and just have beers, but it's different. It's still
not the same. There's a difference between going to a bar and like cracking open a cold one like in front of your laptop.
Exactly. Yeah, it's different. I mean, if you imagine, going to Shadows. If it's still there, I don't know if it's still there.
We have a fun story to tell you about Shadows.
Then, having a cold one at home and chatting to your friends on video chat, it's different. It's not the same as going to Shadows.
No,
not at all.
Shadows has been a little bit. Oh, you go ahead. I was about to say something kind of off topic.
Well, not really. It's going to be about the same thing, because I think, I don't know, Danny, in your time, was Shadow still like in the top of the recreation center?
Yeah. It's upstairs. Yeah.
So it was still same thing as my time. Fortunately, like now it's actually different. It's now actually below the theater.
It's
now the new theater space.
Apparently, the original Shadows wasn't earthquake safe, so they moved it to essentially kind of like, it's like a car park, but they turned it into a bar. So the vibes aren't quite the same, but people still go there anyway.
With the cheap booze, anyone.
Yeah, exactly. They still do $2 toasties. It's all good.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I would still go there.
It's not quite that. There was something about climbing up like 3 flights of stairs to get to Shadows that really made you feel like you'd earned it. So I do kind of miss that. But it's alright.
Going home afterwards, and not falling down the stairs. That's an achievement.
Failing to not fall down the stairs was always kind of like a cornerstone of it, I feel like. Good times. I do miss on-person campus as well. I do think university has lacked a lot since we've kind of gone remote. I mean, not that anyone can help it really. It's not much you can do about it, but it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, it's just, it takes time to adapt.
Yeah. It is interesting how the world has kind of adapted as a response to COVID, because I do feel like even after the pandemic is over, I do get the feeling that just kind of a hybrid approach will continue to be like permanently adapted in most workplaces and kind of most institutions now. And I don't think that's a step we could have taken, I guess, without being forced to take it. Everyone was thinking about it before the pandemic, but it was kind of like, oh, no one wants to be the first one to try this out. So it's interesting.
It is interesting, yeah, because my current work, that's actually the same case where we work on site 1 week and then we work from home for the following week. And in order to keep the pipeline in check and everyone just knows what they're doing, we do daily stand-ups and make sure that everyone knows what everyone's doing.
Yeah.
Danny, kind of curious, how is it like? Yeah, how's the company culture like working remotely?
I think the culture-wise, like I said, it's definitely not as nice. You know, you don't get to have the same feeling of grabbing a coffee in the morning with a friend, and just talking about random stuff. You know, it's definitely a lot harder in my case, since I quite like to be sociable and talk to people and you know understand what they did on the weekend.
Yeah.
But yeah, like for us, we're working fully remote, and after you know when the pandemic kind of been easing up, you know, there's still like Izzy said, it's still gonna be an option of hybrid. You know, you can work at home, you can work remotely, go into the office. It's really flexible now, and I think that's what the industry is going towards. And you know, it's hard to go back. It's hard to convince people to go back. You know, since it's how things been working and during the pandemic.
Yeah, for sure. But you would have been working at Ubisoft before the pandemic started, though, right?
Yeah.
How would you describe the company culture? I guess from that time.
I think I definitely enjoyed, you know, working in the office at Ubisoft. We have a coffee shop that's directly in the building, which is quite cool. You know, it's on the floor above ours.
Yeah.
So, you know, I would usually in the morning, I would see my friend come in, you know, we grab a coffee, we talk about random stuff, what he's been doing, you know, weekend and, you know, what he's been up to. And, you know, it's just those kind of things that kind of creates that bond between people. And I think you really need that bond to make something amazing.
Right.
You know, to be able to share crazy ideas. I think that's actually the reason why I believe culture is really important in creating a really good game. Is one of the things that we used to do is that on Friday, usually we grab a beer at around 4 o'clock, and you know everyone would within the gameplay team, you know, would gather into a room, and you know we just talk about random shit.
Yeah.
So you know, one of the meeting was just our lead came in and just like, you know, let's just talk about the random stuff you want to put in the game.
Yeah.
Whatever you want, just random stuff, you know, like brainstorm random ideas. Like we want to put Easter eggs, like with Far Cry 6, we had cars. We wanted to put like a football field with 2 cars and like a rock in the middle. And just,
I think that's called Rocket League.
Yeah. Sorry, my bad. Yeah. And for me, I wanted to, you know, because we had tanks in Far Cry 6, I wanted to prototype thing like the A-Team, where they drove a tank out of the plane and just, you know, I wanted to prototype something and get the mission designers to just, let's just put something like that as a mission. You know, it fits the Far Cry crazy theme, you know, and and I actually end up, you know, prototyping it, you know, a tank literally floating down and you know, a lot of fire and, you know, all of that jazz. But yeah, unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to polish stuff like that. So it didn't make it into the game. But, you know, I made a video of it. to showcase the team. It had, even the theme song of the A team and everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was good times. It was good times.
This is so sad. The A team that could have been.
The 18th could have been.
Is there anything? Is there anything particularly memorable that you remember coming up with in one of those sessions that actually made it to production?
I think it was like, I don't know if you guys played the game, but the Pegasus, I think, was one of the things that, people were just like, why do we had planes, we had cars, why don't we just combine them together and make something that can fly and you can drive?
Oh my god.
And it turns out, designers liked it and were allowed to make it happen, Like, I remember the very first prototype, it was just like, how do we make something like the physics side anyway, was very different when you're trying to implement a plane and a vehicle.
Right.
They're different. How do we make that happen? Like, we had to, hack some stuff together quickly just so designers could test out this idea and see if it'll work. After a few iterations, and it turns out it was a really, really cool, vehicle, like to have, and it was really fun to drive around. So, they kept it and it kept getting iterated and polished, and now it's in the game.
That's awesome. Do you think, I guess with reference to what you were saying about kind of the more conservative approach Genshin has, would you say that Mihoyo, this wouldn't be something that would happen at Mihoyo, or did stuff like that still make it through at Mihoyo?
With Mihoyo, because like I said, different companies have different ways of working. They're more, Mihoyo is more kind of like disciplined. They separate their boundaries a lot more.
See.
So the designers really have full.
What happened there?
He has left us.
Probably. Did he freeze?
Controls of the design, and they special. Is it okay now?
Sorry, I think you dropped out for a second there.
Yeah, you dropped out there for a second.
Oh, sorry.
You're all good now, though.
Yeah.
As I was saying, working with Mihoyo, they're a lot more disciplined for each role. So designers, they're fully focused and they're experienced with getting the best gameplay designs to the best possible quality. And whereas programmers, our job is really to focus on the coding, making sure the code runs as fast as possible, as efficient as possible, and making sure the code is definitely readability, efficiency, the structure makes sense and it's maintainable in that sense. So it's two different these two companies are, they work in very different ways, and I think they both have their pros and cons. And really, there's no right answer to how you can make a game.
Right.
And I think that's one of the the cool things about working in the game industry is there's no right answer. There's no right way of doing it. It's everyone has their own way, and that's kind of, I believe, is what creates different games and different, yeah.
I mean, I guess it definitely. That definitely shows when you play Genshin, because it's a very clean game, I feel like, to play.
It is a very clean game.
I guess I'm not sure if you worked in this area at all, but I think one of the things that I was always curious about with respect to Genshin Impact is, I think it's one of the first games of its kind that you can play on console and on like a mobile. Like it is scoped to play on a mobile phone, which is quite incredible for like how big the game is, I guess. Was there significantly more manpower working on optimizing the game for it to be able to run on a phone? Or
I didn't work on Genshin, so I'm hired on the next project Mihoyo is working on. But I have experience in the mobile industry as well, and I believe the workflow they would have done is they would have optimized everything for mobile first, which essentially means, if you can get something running on mobile, you're gonna be able to get it running on console. So it's the same thing that when I ported, mobile games, is if you can make it work on the lower spec phones, then you're gonna be fine, on the high spec phones.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe that's gonna be their mentality, is to, develop targeting the low specs, and then, porting is gonna be a lot easier.
I think it's a really clever way to approach it, just because I think mobile gaming is becoming such a prevalent medium for video games. Because I mean, I feel like to play a console game or a PC game, you kind of have to be invested in video games. Whereas I feel like everyone is a mobile gamer to some degree. So I think it's a really innovative idea to grasp the mobile market.
It is, and funny enough, the New Zealand Game Developers Association did a study in it 2 years ago, and apparently 2020 is like the first time mobile gamers have usurped PC and console.
Oh.
So yeah, now it's actually 52% mobile gaming, and then the remainder being PC, being a battle between PC and console.
Yeah. Do you think it's all those like Candy Crush players?
It is, and yeah, then actually
could be
a really good point there though is that I guess that is actually the point of porting, is that you port it to the worst, I say worst possible setting, but like the most difficult setting, which is the lower spec phones.
We know what your bias is in terms of what you like to play on. Yeah, but it's a good approach, I reckon.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be, I think, gives you the less pain, if you're developing for a low spec first and then porting to a high spec. I mean, most of the time, you can see with porting, you can see a lot of that just from the console games, that's released on both the last gen consoles like PS4 and also on this gen consoles. A lot of them, for PS5, they just support higher res textures, or they support higher frame rates. So just with the pure more processing power, that's relatively easy to do without much coding and much modification of the whole engine. Yeah.
Do you think more? Oh, you go ahead, Josh.
You go.
I was just wondering, Danny, for your insight on this. Do you think more and more games in the coming years are going to become kind of cross-compatible in the same way Mihoyo's games are, and that we're going to start seeing more games that are available on the PC, on the console, and on the mobile all at once? Or do you think this is a market Mihoyo has kind of captured for itself?
I think it's definitely a trend a lot of big companies are going towards, but it also really depends on the game that they're making. You can already see that with I think Call of Duty, right? There's Call of Duty Mobile now.
Right.
So I can see that with multiplayer games, it's definitely a plus of getting it onto mobile. You want as much player base as big of a player base as you can get, and mobile market it's huge. Everyone has mobile phones these days, and to get them playing your game, you're essentially getting more revenue by doing that. But for games such as more story-driven narrative like God of War, Last of Us, I don't think there's much point in doing that, since those games require you to really set aside your time.
Right. Yes.
To really play those games and, really invest your time. Whereas mobile, it's very short bursts of gameplay time. So yeah, it really depends on, the game that the company's making. But I think definitely it's going to be a trend for the multiplayer companies that are making multiplayer games.
It really is, and I feel like Genshin is the sole exception to that rule, mainly because it is one of the very few games that has a massive user base on both PC, console, and mobile, despite being an exploration game.
Yeah.
despite being a
Yes.
single player exploration game. So that is actually very interesting.
Because I was gonna say I have seen people like, even though mobile games are focused on kind of short burst, like, you know, short attention span games, I have seen people play Genshin for hours and hours on their phone. You know,
Oh,
I
definitely. Yeah,
and
yeah.
I guess it's kind of maybe more a thing of if you can catch their attention in that short time span. Um, I mean, like, it's yeah, because it's interesting. I think it's more about a sort of like almost like an addictiveness to a game. I feel like that has a very negative connotation, which is not what I'm looking for. But I guess I'm wondering how you can kind of like harness that. It's that sort of addictiveness in a game.
Necessarily addictiveness,
Mm,
because when it comes to game design, I
mm,
read a book about this with Celia Hoden. It's not necessarily addictive, you trying to make the player addicted to your game. It's
mm,
more of trying to capture enough of the aesthetic and enough of the user's attention to retain and then retain that in the next iteration.
yeah,
So I tomorrow or in a few hours later after their sprint.
yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I mean I'm still quite I'm still very much a beginner in terms of my game development journey. I
Mhm.
guess I was wondering what are some tips or like some ways you can try and create flow in a game that you develop, or
Mm.
flow. Or Clinton has messaged me and he said flow is the word you're looking for, and I think he's
Yeah, it's a
correct.
state of flow,
Yes,
basically.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think here you're talking more about the gameplay loop, right?
Mm,
That's
The gameplay
what the
loop,
term,
how
yeah, the term
yeah.
that we use often. It's very hard to develop a brand new like genre or brand new gameplay loop. It takes a lot of time simply because you need to do a lot of testing on what feels fun to play,
mm,
and it's very often that project are either scrapped or they go completely in a different direction,
mm,
just because what they've tried before, it just really doesn't work. And how this really, what determines the success is it's really comes down to, like I said, I believe it's the culture and the team. If you got a team that is experienced but also works really well together and they're able to brainstorm, bounce idea off each other, that's
mm,
where you'll find something that's really special. And that's gonna be, that new thing that everyone will get captured on. I mean, like for example, like Battle Royale, um, it was a brand new way of playing, and obviously there's no way that just one person sat in his room, decided I'm gonna make a Battle Royale and it's gonna just explode.
yeah.
He must have had to talk with a bunch of people, bounce ideas off each other,
Mm,
and
Mm.
make this stuff happen. So yeah, it's not an easy process, depend like even for big studios.
mm,
Yeah, so it there's no sure way of getting that flow. It's really just depending on the team's culture,
yeah.
experience, and yeah, and a bit of magic dust, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I
The
guess.
secret sauce, as some will say.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess that's. I assume that's a big role of the game testers. I guess it's people you can keep chucking the game back to and get kind of feedback on what can we do better, how can we fix this game.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes and no. Like tester's role is more towards bug hunting and all of that,
Right.
but
I see.
to do with reviews,
Mm,
it's very often that big companies and any companies would do play sessions within their own teams,
yeah.
either with just the people who are making the game or just other teams
Mm,
that are in the same studio,
right.
just so they can get fresh ideas and feedback from them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the things within the game industry that's really cool. And one thing that I mentioned about game design is why I think their job is so hard is everyone plays games in the industry and everyone has their favorite and idea. So anyone can contribute to ideas and
Mm.
about game design and how things should work. Yeah.
Right. Awesome.
That is very interesting because even the software and web industry actually have this similar scenario where QA is definitely just more about bug hunting and making it much more. And here's the interesting thing about software and versus games is that where software tries to make it as foolproof as possible, games allow a certain caveat so that you can make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And that's I don't know, Danny, what's your insight on that? Because it is interesting how in software and web they try to make it as easy to use for the user as possible, but with games it's a bit different. So
Yeah. Like I was talking to Izzy before, I think game is more closely related to the movie industry. And so it's a lot more creative in a sense where there's no right way of doing things. Whereas traditional software company, they usually follow, for example, the water flow way of pipeline. So, you've got your development stage, it goes through testing, and then it comes down to release, and then you work on the next release, so on and so forth. But with software, I wouldn't say it's hectic, but it's very like fast paced, and the iteration is really, really tight. So that, you really want to be flexible to be able to pivot and change directions.
Right.
And that kind of is also reflected in how you write code. The other aspect is that, our industry, the game industry, isn't as, what's the word? Like, it's not, like nobody's gonna die if you make a mistake.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's not like somebody's life is, depends on this product, which also makes it, you're able to experiment a lot more.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason why there's that kind of difference.
Interesting. I'd never actually thought about it that way before. But yeah, I guess when I think of most other types of software that you develop, someone, messing up will result in, something quite serious for someone down the line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Either people lose money or lives are lost, or something crazy else that's devastating happens. Usually with games, you get a bunch of people complaining on your forum about this bug, and then you do a hot fix the next week, and everything's fine.
Yeah.
Everything's fine.
I mean,
until the next batch of bug comes.
I mean, Skyrim came out and the world's still fine, so
Oh, yeah, exactly. And it was the best game ever, right?
Right.
Especially with the mods.
Yes.
Especially with the mods.
I actually played
the engine.
I've played the entirety of Skyrim completely vanilla. I don't know how I did it. I just remember it was the first game I ever played. And because it was the first game I'd ever played, I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is the best game. So it was it was definitely a wild experience, and I don't think I can ever go back to Skyrim because I've played so many games since. But it's definitely an interesting game. I feel like most game quality is a lot tighter since its release.
Yeah, but I mean, like I played Skyrim and I enjoyed it a lot as well. And also I've played Fallout 4, and I think their strength is not with their visuals or how polished their game is. I think their strength is the element of surprise.
Yeah.
All the random stuff that can happen in the game that nobody else finds.
Yeah.
Like, for example, in Fallout 4, you could randomly find a kid locked in a fridge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have a small quest that goes on with that.
Yeah.
It's just like, what the hell is going on?
I think what also another reason they did so well is I think with a lot of video games, a lot of people aren't used to having almost like essentially unlimited control of whatever they do. Like there's a lot of games, for good reason, that kind of railroad you down the story they want to, and the purpose they want to tell you. So I guess people get, I think that's why I enjoyed Skyrim so much. There was really the sense of like I can do anything. Like in this anything I want in this game, and the game will still keep going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's really, Bethesda's secret sauce.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
To be fair, props to them, because I think it would be, and I mean, evidently it is. I think it's, if you want to give a player that much control, I think it would be really hard to quality control that,
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to get Bethesda on here at some point for a launch night. You can ask them about that.
Actually, I know some programmers that used to work in Bethesda. Maybe I'll put you guys in touch.
Oh, cool. You can come by and have a watch.
Exactly. I'd love to hear, how their experience goes, if it's similar to mine or yeah.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Cool.
That would be awesome, yeah.
Anything else you want to bring up,
Actually, we
Josh?
do have a few more questions because we are actually reaching over time at the moment, but that's fine.
No worries.
I have a couple of questions, one of them mainly to do with the port with Path of Exile. It's actually interesting because it is a game, one of the very few games that I know you worked on that has its own custom engine.
Yeah.
And my main curiosity is, how difficult was it to port it to the Xbox One, and how often did you have to talk to Jonathan Rogers or the Grinding Gear team to make the port work?
So first of all, difficulty-wise, because the engine needed a bit of updating, so that in that sense there was a bit of work to be done. But apart from that, it was pretty straightforward in sense, because it was a PC build from Windows, which is porting to essentially another Windows platform.
Right. Yeah. True.
And the APIs, Microsoft done really well in that sense, where they made sure the porting process is as smooth as possible.
Right.
But with talking to Jonathan, we had to have meetings with them, quite often, just to discuss, the problems that we'd face, how he would like to solve them, or what his suggestions are. As he pretty much single-handedly wrote the whole engine.
Yeah.
So we needed to kind of rely on his expertise of, if we did the port, if we fix this stuff like this and we ported it in this way, would it have any impact on other parts of the game? Like, we need to rely on them for that kind of knowledge to make sure, the porting process is smooth.
Right.
Yeah, I also forgot, Xbox is owned by Microsoft, so it wouldn't have been too much of an issue.
I forgot about that somehow.
Exactly, yeah.
I guess it would have been a different story if it was a port to the PlayStation.
Yeah, so for PlayStation, it might have needed a bit of work, but I mean, the engine was really well written, in the sense where the gameplay code is very separate from the engine code.
Right.
When you're porting, you're mostly dealing with the engine side, since the gameplay code is just the gameplay logic. So a lot of stuff you just needed to refactor the code to make sure you're using the different APIs based on which platform you're working on, So it's a lot of different swapping out layers, essentially. Like, for example, for audio system, the Xbox was using X Audio 2, as the original PC was using like a legacy audio system. So because it was so well written that, we could essentially swap the audio APIs and redirect them to the different cores. So it was very just, looking at the different functions and deciding, okay, how do we imitate the legacy in this new API? So just kind of going through that until we, we ported all the different functions, and then just kind of flipping the switch and hoping it doesn't crash. Which it always does, but we try and work through all the bugs and kinks.
You keep going till it doesn't.
Exactly. So that's kind of like the first kind of thing you would try and do when you're porting stuff to different platforms. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah.
I mean,
what was the most? You go.
I was just gonna say, I think that's I guess part of my work experience when I've been doing, when I've been working in software has kind of been like, I've been surprised at how little carries over from university for me. But I guess I don't know. Like if he's followed his solid principles well and he's written everything very nicely like this is it seems like it's made the port to Xbox. That how well the game engine has been written has really helped the port to Xbox.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the lesson of this, viewers, is watch your lectures.
Yes,
Definitely,
and document
definitely.
as much as possible.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I do have a couple more questions, mainly to do with like Rush Digital and like, what was the most memorable project for you when you were working at Rush?
Most memorable. Wow, there's a
Mm.
lot. Uh,
I'm guessing favorite would be the first one.
it's gonna be hard. I mean, I really enjoyed working on Path of Exile because that was kind of like my first, big AAA game that is on the console, and that's where I really wanted to go. So I was really, really excited to have a peek under the game to see what the code is like. How do they do certain things. But I think what I like that's what I really enjoyed. But I think what project I learned the most is probably from making our own game at Rush. So we tried to relaunch. So our boss acquired an IP called Drift Legends, and they wanted to try and use that to create a kind of driving game.
Yeah.
Because originally it was a drifting driving game, so they wanted to relaunch that. And we were put in talks with various different companies, the sales team at Rush. And one of the people that they talked to and put us in contact with was the Top Gear franchise. And we thought that would be a really cool idea to work with them. But it turns out that was kind of like my first time trying to make something that's a custom custom engine, with not a lot of people, not a lot of resources, and trying to do everything by myself. And that's the most valuable experience I learned in that is how much effort goes into making a game. We had, including artists, probably I can count them in two hands.
Oh my god.
So the whole team was less than 10 people. So it was pretty crazy. So we had to implement new features in the engine, and as well as new features on the gameplay side. Usually a big AAA company, you'll have a team that's dedicated just to engine, and a team that's dedicated to gameplay. So we're kind of, been thrown there to make this happen. And there's a lot of learning process, a lot of pain about needing to cut stuff, because originally we had lots of ideas, as with a lot of people probably feel with your own game, is that you'll start off with a lot of big ideas, a lot of awesome features you want to put in the game. But as time goes on, you realize I'm running out of time, or I don't have enough resources to do this. So you're forced to look at the real picture and decide what stuff you need to cut out, and what stuff to keep. And I think that's a really hard thing to do and to get right. And on top of that, trying to manage a team and also to program at the same time, being able to wear a lot of different hats also let me know how much work that is. And it's definitely needs more than a few people to get the game to that high quality.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I guess in the end it comes down to and we're always banging on about this at the Game Developer Guild, but it's like a question of scope. I feel like, because it comes down, it always. I've had so many times where I've come down to the deadline and I'm like, I have to cut all this stuff out. Like, I can't do this. I can't do this. It's become a very familiar feeling to me. I feel like, and I almost feel like it's one I don't think anyone can be prepared for. You almost kind of have to just keep trying projects and learn it the hard way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
there's
Yeah.
that's kind of the reason why, we have managers, right?
Mm.
They're the person taking notes and keeping track of these things to make sure, hey, this week we've got all of this stuff to do. Are we gonna make it when
Yeah.
we're gonna ship? They're the people
Mm.
that need to raise the flag and be like, hey, we're not gonna make it. Let's start cutting
Course
some
correct.
clumps of. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There's a reason why vertical slice is becoming much more of a common trend in the games
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One final questions, a couple of final questions before we sign off.
Cool.
Coming from Clinton, what mechanic would you want to see more featured on the game in our current climate on the current bit industry? So what kind of gameplay mechanic would you want to see more?
That's a good question.
Mm.
Actually, yeah, that's a good question. I actually have been playing Persona 5 recently, and there's one mechanic that I really enjoyed is, having time as a resource.
Mm,
That's very interesting.
yeah.
Uh, it really makes you think about your choices and what choices you're gonna make in the game.
Yeah.
Because
Mm.
with all the games like Fallout, all the games you think about their
Mm.
side quests, right? And
Mm.
the game's like, oh, the world is coming to an end, but I'm gonna go and save this duck over here,
Yeah. Exactly.
and I'm gonna, like, for example, like Izzy said, Skyrim, you're trying to save the world and you kind of go off on a tangent for the next
Go on
100 or
a
so
massive
hours.
Yeah.
tangent.
Yeah, and yeah, what happens? Nothing happens. You're still kind of, the world ending thing kind of
Mm.
pauses for
Mm.
you. And yeah, and I think that a little bit kind of breaks the immersion for me a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think it would be interesting to implement something like that, to more games. Like, imagine, Skyrim, you only have enough time to do these things, and you got to really pick and choose what you do.
Yeah.
Even Mass Effect really tries to push you to choose
Yeah.
between the characters you're allowed to have, and I think with time, that's another layer of forcing the player to choose, and and live with their consequences.
Mm.
And I think that's really interesting that that could be done. Yeah.
I think it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to. I think, especially for me, I don't know if this is all players, but definitely with me, I find it hard to commit to like a decision in a game. I'm like,
Mm.
I guess
No, I'm the
that's
same.
yeah, no. So I think it would be really interesting to implement, forcing you to make a choice. But I guess
Yeah.
I think what I guess that comes with a lot of overhead because then I guess games have to take into account, okay, what is the outcome of this choice versus this choice,
Mm.
for like a whole bunch of choices all throughout the game.
Mm.
But it would be really interesting to see. I agree. Thanks for that.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I have a fun story about Persona 5. And and
No
not the
spoilers.
one
Yeah.
not the one you think. No. Um the time mechanic is actually very true, and that Persona 5 is actually the first entry of since Persona 1 that actually takes it everything a bit more practically and a bit more and everything a bit more impactful for the player experience. So it is actually the case that when I was playing it a couple of summers ago, it kind of taught me how to do time management really well, both
Yeah.
both
Real life experiences, right?
yeah, yeah, both in the game and in real life. And lo and behold, it actually happened. Look where we are now.
Just put completed Persona 5 on your CV, like right at the top.
Yeah, management,
Yeah, management skills all
you
over.
just play Persona 5, perfected
Yes.
everything.
Exactly. This is kind of off topic, but Noah in the chat says Persona 5 is so good, Friend Simulator on crack.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, like
Yes.
the time mechanic isn't new, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's been around for ages, like with flash games, dating sims and stuff like that. That's always been around. It just hasn't really been implemented into like mainstream game.
Yeah.
And yeah, and used in that kind of way, which I think it's really interesting that you can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, on the topic of a game mechanic, another one that I just thought of, and I've kind of been playing around with this idea for my own game is, rather than making RPG choices obvious, with the choice like Mass Effect, you've got 3 choices or whatever choices, and you choose one. You make your choices through actions that you actually do. So what's the game called? Metro Exodus, that's the one. So in that game, you actually impact the storyline based on your actions. If you kill people, or if you do certain actions, like there's no actual dialogue that really, well, there's still dialogue choices, but it's another layer that players don't see, and it's not obvious to them, but it makes sense. So if you kill a whole bunch of people, you go through your whole storyline just killing people, you get the bad ending, and if you do it another way, you get a different ending. It could involve more of doing that, and how to imitate, like you said, like in real life, like if you go around playing, like for example Zelda, if you go around looting people's house, eventually everyone's gonna just chase you away or be angry at you, lock their doors, for example. Like you won't be able to get in any doors. Yeah, so just interesting stuff like that.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I feel like I've seen that implemented in quite a lot of kind of like lower budget and definitely like in more Metroidvania style games, as well as RPG games, but I have yet to see it implemented in as much depth in kind of like a higher resolution game. I feel like, I guess I'm thinking games I've played that are like Hollow Knight and Undertale. If you played those,
Yeah,
there's
Undertale, definitely.
definitely like that. I guess, I mean, the closest attempt, or like an attempt I can think of in the AAA industry was like Red Dead 2, because you didn't really choose dialogue there. It was supposed to, your actions were supposed to influence your ending, but it was this very binary thing. It was just like, if you have done more good actions, you get good ending. And it was like, you could go like murder a guy and then you go pet a dog 5 times and it all works itself out.
Yeah, obviously petting dog, is fine. 5 times, this is fine. You can murder a guy, it's okay. You're a good person.
Yeah. So it's just like, I think, no, I agree with that. I think I do feel like it would be interesting to see something like that implemented in a larger scale game, I think.
Yeah,
Awesome.
definitely. Yeah, since we are actually over time, one last question would be, what's the best way to contact you, Danny?
Oh,
Or
best way
social
to
media
contact
or
me?
email? Yeah.
Yeah, you can look at you can send me a message on Facebook. From my business website, you can contact me there. If you send me a message, I'll receive it directly. Yeah, email, I think it's the best way. Since I'm in Montreal, it's going to be hard for you to send me a text or give me a call without racking up a large bill. Yeah, I think email and Facebook messages, and through the website is the best. Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Cool. Would you be comfortable with us dropping your email into some of our club members if they would be keen on contacting you with further questions? Or
Definitely, yes, sure, go ahead.
cool. Awesome. Anything else from you, Josh?
Yeah, that's about it.
Anything else you want to say, Danny, before we wrap up today? Or
Yeah, well, I mean, the game industry is, full of passion, and my motto is always, why do an 8-hour workday on something you don't like. If you're doing something you love, you don't feel like it's working. And I think that's especially true with me, ever since coming into the game industry. Like, I couldn't imagine myself going into Microsoft or Amazon, all of that.
Right.
Yeah, just because I'm having fun, not just making games, but also talking about games with the different people I meet, and everyone here is passionate, and it's just I wouldn't have done it in any other way.
Right. I guess it is that whole thing of like it's what was it? It was like do what you love and you never work a day in your life or something.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
I hope.
I mean, it's not 100% true,
Yeah.
but it's a lot easier.
You work some days in your life, but some days it's also fun.
Yeah, because I mean, you sometimes you get some features which is like, this is just boring.
Yeah.
But it's not like that every day.
Yeah.
And yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending launch night with us, Danny, and having this Q&A with us. It's been a pleasure, honestly.
No worries. No, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Not at all. Do keep in touch. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in today. We do have our first event next Monday at 6 p.m.
Yes.
We'll share the details for that. But if you are keen on learning how to do art for games and animation for games, do tune into that. And we will follow up with more on our Discord. But otherwise...
I gotta believe!